I have a question. What's a permutation? So permutation is just different ways that we can order things. So let's take the example that I have here on my screen. There are three numbers here, and these numbers can be combined in different orders for a total of 6 permutations. So for the first permutation, we'll say 25 goes first, 77, 82. There's permutation number 1. Permutation number 2, 25, 82, 77. The next permutation, let's put 77 first, and that means then we can have 25 and 82, 77, 82 and 25, and the last permutation here's going to be 82, 25, 77, 82, 77, 25. 6 different combinations here. Now, let's say that we added a 4 on there. This number would get exponentially larger. So that's what a permutation is. There are 6 permutations that are displayed here. So in the context of the playlist optimizer, let's go take a look at that code real quick. So let's just keep this super simple. Dr. Kortmeyer's code is at the top of my program here. And the first thing we have to do is initialize permutations. So I pass in the number of entries that I have. If you recall, we had 3 different entries. And the only thing this is going to do is print out the total combinations. Now, if you remember, we did it. It was 6. Let's see what happens here. And total combinations is 6. That's exactly as we would expect it. So now, let's have a little bit of code that's actually going to print out what all of those combinations are. Now, instead of actually printing out the actual numbers this time, I'm just going to print out the number order. So, if we were to look at it like this, let's say that 25 is number 1, 77 is number 2, 82 is number 3, okay? And actually, let's call these, 0, 1, 2. So that means that instead of printing out the numbers, we're going to print out those 0, 1, 2 combinations. So let's take a look at some code that will do that for us. Let's walk through this code just a little bit. So as soon as we call initialize permutations, we have access to this variable called permutation array count. And that just tells us how many combinations there are. We printed that out. It makes lots of sense. Shouldn't have any worries there. So what this code does is it says, man, I got to loop through all 6 combinations so I can print the order of these. That part's easy enough. Now this part is where things start to get a little bit confusing. What we're doing is we're looking at, the first time through, we look at permutation 0, and we get an array back. And the array looks just like this. Those are the types of values that are in that array. So now we get that list of orders back, and then this little nested loop here, this just goes through and it prints out the indices in order. So there are going to be 3 items in here, and it's going to print out 3 numbers. It's going to put tabs between them, and then we're going to put a couple of blank lines afterwards. Let's try this code out and see what happens. So you can see it says total combinations is 6, and then for combination 0, here's the order. Combination 1, here's the order. So you can see that this code, it loops through, and it actually helps us understand the order of these. So let's now take the next step. Okay, so now I've made some changes. I've added some comments as well. But the big change is that I've added a data array. Remember that an array is just a list of stuff. So we have a list of numbers, and if you recall, we looked at our list of numbers here. So I've simply translated that list into this data array at the beginning of our program. There are 3 items in the list, which is why this says new int 3 here. So we know that we have 3 different permutations, so we go ahead and put that into the initialized permutations line. Like we talked about before, this is going to tell us what the total combinations are. We already know from working through this by hand that there are only 6 combinations, 6 ways that these things can be ordered. So now what we're going to do is, this basically says loop through all those 6 combinations, and if there were more combinations, this would automatically loop us through however many combinations there were. So if you have 9 items in your list, there are like 300,000 combinations. Okay, so what this will do then is this line right here actually tells us which combination number we're on. This is for our own tracking. Okay, so when we say get permutation and we pass in whichever one we happen to be on, we end up with a list of indexes. And what that tells us is that's just, for example, the number of the item in the list. So if we go back to our list, right here, this is item 0, item 1, item 2. I have those labeled up at the top here. But now we need to know what those combinations are going to be. So imagine, instead of having the actual numbers in here, we would have like 0, 1, 2, 0, 2, 1. That's what's going to get returned, and then we've got to translate that into which of the numbers are going to show up. So that's what's going on here. So we get the list of indexes. That's the 0, 1, 2 in whatever order. And then we're going to go through those indexes, and we're going to print out that whatever the index number is, and then the item from the data array up here for that index number. So for example, the first time we come through, the index will say 0 and we'll print out 25. And the next time the index will be 1 and we'll print out 77. And the third time it's going to be 2 and we'll print out 82. So we're going to print out what the index is, and we're going to print out the actual information that results from that index. So I went ahead and I ran that code, and what you can see here is that just like we saw in that other list, index 0 is always going to be value 25. Anytime in here that we see index 0, value is 25. Index is 0, value is 25. Every single time. So what this shows us is all of those different combinations. A good way to learn this on your own is to go through and comment out some of these bits of code. Just comment out some of these lines and see what happens. Try changing some of these lines to different things. Change some of the numbers up here. Maybe even try this with a string array. That will really help you get a sense of what permutations are and how they work. And then, if you feel really adventurous, you can crank this up to 4 items and see what happens. '23 combinations now. Okay, good luck.